Before I jump in, it's been a while and I'm the last thing between you and lunch. I do have the clicker, I lied. Forgive me, I have no idea how that works. If you want, take a second, stand up. I was doing this outside, I was just bending over and touching my toes. If you don't have to. Y'all are tougher than I am. My back is killing me. Anyway, hi, I'm Joaquin. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO at Minerva. Minerva, we're obsessed with helping you drive adoption of your products, and specifically working with your product champions to drive adoption. So what we do behind the scenes, we're an AI that creates custom knowledge bases for each one of your clients. So the ability to essentially give them how-to guides that are specific to their SOPs on your platform. But that's really not what that's the wrong thing. So if I just blinded, blind is better. Somebody over there, I apologize. There we go. That's us, minervaknows.com, Joaquin, Roca, if you need the whole name. Nice to meet you all. And yes, today I'm going to be here talking about champion-driven adoption. Champion-driven adoption is a framework that we have come up with through research. My background is in organizational psychology. It's a really weird thing to become a technology entrepreneur. Thank you for the interested look. I appreciate that. I was trained as an organizational psychologist, never finished my PhD, but I did do a whole bunch of research there, did everything except for my dissertation. That had no interest for me. I didn't want to be an academic. But a lot of the research here is from organizational psychology. And also we've spoken with literally now hundreds of customer success folks who sit in your chairs, all of whom have similar questions. I was just listening in, obviously, on the last Q&A. The last question, I think it was the last question, how many CSMs do we need per client, right? You're thinking about this one-to-many touch. This is a very trendy thing to start to think about, one-to-many, right? What does that look like? Especially when CSM is so personal, right? One of the cores to what you do is being personal, understanding the pain points for each one of your clients, for each one of your product champions. What are their KPIs? What are their career goals? Like, we're talking about really specific here. The best CSMs know that that's how you're going to engage and work with your clients. How do you do that when you have 50 clients? And each of those 50 clients, you're hoping to get dozens of people on board, right? That's really hard. It's unnatural for someone who works in relationships to do that. And so what we've come up with is champion-driven adoption. Right? It's the process by which you find and identify and empower your product champions, those people that you work with closely, really closely, who love your product, who get value out of your product. How do you work with them? How do you empower them to give them the tools they need to drive adoption of your product in their organization forward? Because they can know everyone's name, their KPIs, their career goals in their organization. You can't do that, but you can empower them to do that job, right? Oftentimes we say, if you find a product champion, your goal is to get them a promotion. You want this to go so well, it's a career-making opportunity for them, right? And that's your job as a CSM. Empower them to have such a good experience with your platform that it makes this their career, at least the next step in their career. Oftentimes when we talk with folks in these other CSMs, they'll expand, right, in that client when their champion gets a promotion. They get a new client when their champion leaves for a better job at another organization, right? That's your goal, is to create that relationship. And so what we're going to talk about today is, how do you do that? What does that look like? How do you engage with customer champions, product champions in your clients? And how do you actually empower them to do the job of driving adoption? I am so not used to this anymore. I used to do this a lot. Now we do a lot of small groups. We actually run these several times a month for small groups, typically 3 to 5 people at a time, heads of customer success, because I want it to be interactive. And so I don't know if it's against the rules to have this be interactive at all. Oh, so if you guys want to scream at me, I'm a rule breaker. I can't help it. If you want to scream at me, ask questions, disagree with me, I would love that. Throw them in my way. But first, we're going to go into this S-shaped adoption curve. I'm happy to share references for any of the research here. I'm not going to go into it right on stage because that seems like a waste of time, although talking about it seems like an even bigger waste of time. Apologize. But the S-shaped adoption curve. You're going to see here essentially what adoption for innovations new products looks like within a population over time. You've got about, and it's a normal distribution, right? You're going to have a few folks, these innovators, who are about 2.5% of the population, who are going to try the new thing because it's shiny and new. And then you're going to have another about 13.5, so a total about 16% of the population who are early adopters. Maybe they're not trying it because it's shiny and new, but they're really comfortable with innovation, they're really comfortable with technology, and they understand the value, the competitive advantage they can get by using your technology. This 16% are really going to be the population of folks that you can find your product champions with. I feel like I'm pacing a lot, and I don't feel like I'm paying much attention to this side of the room, and I apologize. You all are amazing. So the product adoption curve. So you're going to find that along the way, you see the cumulative distribution function. I don't know why I'm going to this, but there's a cumulative distribution function. That's the S curve, how long it takes to get folks onto your platform, right, over time. As CSMs, your goal is to change the slope of that curve. That curve can be really long and painful, right? You get those first, let's call it 10 or 15 folks on board. It looks really good, but you're trying to get 200 people to use your platform. You plateau after 15. It started out really great, and now you've plateaued. Why? Why is that plateau happening? Can I change the slope of this curve so that it goes from those 15 and just explodes to the next 100 people using my platform? How do I do that? That is the content that we're going to go over today. First thing is to understand the different mindsets, motivations of folks who are using your platform. And I'm coming over this way because, like I said, I wasn't paying enough attention over here. Hello. This was actually the subject of my academic research. Achievement goal orientation, the work of Carol Dweck, amongst others. Amazing. She actually put out a popular press book, which I never read. I've only read her primary research, but it's incredible. Achievement goal orientation basically breaks people into two different types of goals, achievement goals. You can have a performance goal or a mastery goal, sometimes called a learning goal. When you are mastery goal oriented, your primary orientation is to gain competence, to get better at a thing. When you're performance goal oriented, your primary motivation is to show that you are in fact good at this thing. So you want to display competence. That's the performance goal. Then you've got the approach form and the avoid form, whether you're success oriented or failure oriented. What does any of this have to do with champion-driven adoption? The champions that you're working with are going to have different motivations. Pardon me. They're going to have a different motivation, different orientation than folks that come later in the cycle. In fact, that S-shaped curve, right, when we talked about these 5 different adopter groups, and can I go back? 5 different adopter groups. You've got your innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and your laggards. These 5 different adopter groups each have different motivations. So your strategy for onboarding and helping people adopt your software has to change over time. If you only have one strategy, this is the way that we do adoption, this is the way that we do onboarding, and you actually have a 12 or 18-month curve to get everyone in your client organization onto your platform, you're trying to one-size-fit-all something that's not one-size-fit-all. And so what I would say is, as you go through the adoption curve, you're going to start at that top left, and we're going to go clockwise down to the bottom left. As you think about what are the motivations for the folks who are adopting my platform at any given time. So mostly you're going to start with those learning-oriented folks, people who are looking to gain competence. And with these folks, you can actually fail. This is something that's really interesting. A lot of the customer success folks that we've spoken with will tell us, if I fail early in the journey, not that I'm going to do this on purpose, although some have said they've been tempted to have a small failure early on so you can come in and make it right. Right? When you do that, then they trust you. Right? They're saying, oh, actually, we're going to work together. I can see that you're going to be responsive to me, and we're going to learn together, and we're going to get better. Of course it didn't go right. But I know that now when we hit a problem, when we hit a bump along the way, you're going to solve it. We're going to work together. We're going to collaborate to get better at this. Those are definitely learning-oriented folks. It's not everyone in your population. In fact, it might not be the majority of folks. But early in the journey, they're almost certainly those learning-oriented folks, the mastery-oriented folks. And so you can fail. The core difference, I would say, between someone who's mastery-oriented and someone who's performance-oriented is their response to failure, and thus their tolerance for risk, right? If I'm willing to take a risk, that means I'm likely to fail. If I'm adopting a new platform, a new product, what am I doing? I'm taking a risk. What's likely to happen? I might fail. Performance-oriented people are really afraid by that, because for a performance-oriented person, failure is diagnostic. It means I can't do this. I'm not good enough. For a learning-oriented or a mastery-oriented person, failure is an opportunity. Oh, wow, this is great. This is an area I can get better at. I can gain confidence. You've given me something I can do. And so as you go through, you're probably working with more mastery-oriented people in the early stages and more performance-oriented people in the later stages. In fact, the laggards, the folks that are hardest to get on board, feels like an anchor. They do become an anchor for you, but in a good way. Those laggards are probably performance avoid oriented. They're afraid that they can't do this, that they don't have the ability to use this platform. They don't know how to do it. In fact, I know that some of our clients are switching people off of fax machines, which is insane to me. You're switching people off fax machines?
Yeah, they work in healthcare where insurance still uses fax machines a lot.
Insanity, why? Because they know they can do it. They're not afraid. I put the thing in, it works. They're performance oriented. They might even be performance avoid oriented. I just don't want to fail. You're telling me to log in? What is single sign-on? Nope. I'm away, I'm done with that. Performance avoid. But when those people, you show them, you help them, you make sure they find success. You give them that small first step, and they figure it out and they get value. Well, now they're hooked. You're their new fax machine, which means in 30 years, they're still going to be using your platform. This is the opportunity for really deep adoption. If you get those laggards, the people who are really afraid of technology, to use your technology, they're never going to want to get off. Those early adopters, right, the people who are really excited by the shiny new object, sometimes they're hard to keep because there's another shiny object. But if you get those laggards and you make sure that they're comfortable with your platform and everybody's getting value, you've got an anchor in a good way. And so think about, as you're going through your adoption process, early on in the beginnings, you're probably working with folks who are much more mastery-oriented. Later on, you're going to be working with folks who are much more performance-oriented. And even later, performance avoid, really afraid of showing that they can't do this. And that's where resistance comes from. Oftentimes it's fear. It's fear that I can't do this, fear that I'll be found out that I can't do this. And so your job is to make it easy for them to do whatever it is that you're trying to help them do. But if they're the 150th person adopting your platform, how do you do that? You're not sitting there with them, but your product champions are. And so it's your job to empower product champions to do that work with them. Side note, that's what Minerva does. If you're interested, come speak. Drivers of product adoption. It's really interesting. And this is a little bit of an academic-looking model. Actually, I had my teams put emoji in to make it a little more approachable. I don't know if that works. But you will notice there are some numbers here. The numbers are basically weights. How strong is the relationship between this thing and this other thing? We know from research that the two main drivers of actual engagement or adoption with a product are its perceived usefulness and its perceived ease of use. So then the question becomes, for customer success, what influences, pardon me, I have just in such an occasion, for such an occasion, cough drops. I'm not an amateur. I know what I'm doing. Perceived usefulness. What influences perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use, which ultimately drive product adoption? Well, I will start with what does not. And this may or may not be surprising to you. Your direct manager. Your direct manager can drive compliance. I can mandate that you use this bit of software. I can't force you to engage and adopt it long term. You'll sign up, and that's it. Done. That's what your manager can do. But it actually has no positive or negative effect on long-term engagement. What does? Product champions. Product champions are people who are actually using the product. It's not a manager telling you to use the product. They're examples of success with your product. And they actually act as beacons of success for everyone else. It's those product champions that actually show you it is useful, right? If you have a new CRM and I'm an AE, and I'm closing new deals, you best believe the other AEs are going to look at me and say, what is that person doing? And how can I do it? It's just natural, right? That's perceived usefulness. I will perceive this as useful when I find my neighbors actually getting success here. Perceived ease of use is a little bit different. Perceived ease of use doesn't go directly from your product champions. Your product champions can help, but they're going to help through another psychological construct called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is my belief that I can do this. And so how do you help people believe that they can do this? That's really important. And that's where product champions should help, right? And that's where customer education comes in, product education comes in, making sure that people know how to get the value out of your product. Really phenomenally important. And you want to empower your product champions to do that education work with and for you, for their peers. So a lot of this research actually comes from a long time ago. It comes from, believe it or not, Iowa in the 1920s. Corn farmers were actually introduced to a new technology, hybrid corn seed. And the hybrid corn seed had some really interesting properties. One, it was a lot more resilient. It grew better, faster, stronger. Two, it had a better stalk. And so that the pickers that the corn farmers used actually did a better job of picking. And so it was just far superior to their traditional corn seed. It took about 12 years until 90+% of Iowa corn farmers were using hybrid corn seed. Pretty fast adoption for something so ingrained into their livelihood. When they go back and they look, it was actually 3 or 4 years, only about 10% of people in those first 3 or 4 years actually adopted this hybrid corn seed. And they asked them, what made you adopt this new technology, this hybrid corn seed? They said, well, I did a little bit of research, the marketing materials, the salesperson came by, and I thought, what the hell, let's do it. 100%, these are the early adopters and innovators. These are the folks that are just willing to give it a shot. It is your livelihood. You're a corn farmer and you change your corn seed. That's insane, but you did it. The next 90%, when they went back and they asked, what made you adopt the corn seed? This is the people who adopted in years 3 through 10. 90% of folks. It was not salespeople. It wasn't marketing material. It wasn't the research. What was it? It's my neighbors. First 10%. Whoever it was, you're brilliant. What's your name, man? Garner is brilliant. He's going to do the rest of the presentation. It's that first 10%. It's the product champions, the people who are using it. Because my neighbor was using it. I could see my neighbor actually getting better yields. I knew that my neighbor would come over and help me understand if there was a difference, how I could work with this new corn seed. My neighbor was there. It's the product champion. It's that first 10%. That's your job. Your job is to find that first 10%. Get them to become product champions. Get them to be able to enable their neighbors. And that's the core of it. Okay, let's keep going. Thank you. Feels good in the middle. I appreciate that. Self-advocacy is an individual's belief in their ability to produce the desired results. Is your product intimidating? Is it configurable? Are you asking them to do every single thing on day one? If you are, I bet you get about 10% people using it and 90% of the people said, nope, not for me. Right? And so, again, in that adoption curve, you can do that with your first 10%. But if you don't change your strategy after you got those first 10%, adoption is not happening. It's just not going to happen. You have to figure out, how do I create this feeling of self-efficacy for each of these groups that come subsequently? In your product, there are 5 different ways that you can do this, actually. One, it's going to be the relative advantage. How do you communicate the relative advantage of your product? How do you empower your champions to show the advantage that they're getting from using your product? 2, compatibility. Is it compatible with what I already do? Change management is part of your job. Customer success is inherently a change management function. One of the most powerful things that you can do as a change management agent is to make sure you're communicating what's remaining the same. This is not changing, right? We're going to work with you right in your flow, right where you already work. How is this compatible? Make sure that your product champions can show their peers, their neighbors, how your product is compatible with what they're already doing. Complexity. How hard is this to use? How complex it is? How configurable? The more powerful and more established your platform gets, the more complex it gets. The more important it is for you to break it down and make it easy, especially for folks who are performance-oriented and they are afraid of failure. They don't want to do everything on day one because they don't know how to do it yet, and they're going to fail. They don't want to experiment and risk failure. Make it really easy. Make it trialable. is the next thing. Give them a day one guide, a week one guidebook in how to use your product and how to get that advantage. And then finally, once they've done it, show them. Give them that reinforcement. Make sure they can observe the results. And so those are the 5 different things that you can do within your product, and you can help empower your product champions to drive through to their peers, to their neighbors. This is essentially everything that we just talked about, all in one graph. Customer success is also a liaison function, right? And so you are probably starting with the sales team and going all the way through to expansion revenue, right? You're going to be the person working with the sales team, working with the implementation team, working with your product champions, driving that throughout. You're the consistent voice in the customer's ear. You're their consistent partner. But each step of the way, you're going to have different goals, and you're going to be working with different parts of your team to drive engagement, drive adoption. First, it's going to be the sales team. They're selling to those super early innovators, and they're going to focus on, what am I getting, the relative advantage. And at this point, you want to focus on the perceived utility over the perceived ease of use. Because again, it's okay, these people are the early adopters. They'll figure it out. You don't have to make it easy for them to use. You have to convince them there's value there. As you go through, that's going to change. The laggards, they already know there's value because they see everybody else getting value. You want to make it really easy for them to use. Next is the implementation team, professional services, forward deployed engineers. Again, you're going to work with them. The goal at this point is to really focus on compatibility. How is our product compatible with the ways that they already work? How can we make sure that it fits into their existing processes? Really important. Next, you're going to identify and work with product champions. You're going to help empower them to do this work alongside you, because after this part, the champion engagement, they're really going to be the ones that are driving adoption of your product. You're supporting them, you're empowering them, you're giving them the tools, like Minerva, sorry, keep having to do that. My team would be mad at me if I didn't do that. Like Minerva, to give them the ability to drive adoption through the organization, to empower folks, to really understand how to get that advantage, get the value out of your product. Oh my God, it's 7 minutes left. I wanted to stop with some time for questions. 3 different types of champions, and then we'll stop. You should have a champion network. You want to have a network of champions, right? One champion's no good. No matter how much they love your platform, they may leave. They may get fired. They may get a promotion. You don't want to be stuck with one champion. Make sure you have a network of champions. And if you're going to have a network of champions, we suggest 3 different types of champions. Not all champions are built the same. It's very unlikely that one champion is going to play more than one of these roles, certainly not all 3. First role for your champion is the maven, the person who loves your tool. One of the things that actually people bring in Minerva for is that they say, we've got these champions, and their trainings on our platform is better than our training. What the hell? How do we capture that? How do we use that with our clients, right? Can we actually give these mavens, pardon me, can we give these mavens the tools they need to build those trainings faster, easier, better, to make sure that their peers are adopting? And so that's one. You're going to have your mavens. 2, champion network, salespeople. It's not your salespeople who are actually selling your product. These are champions who understand the pain points of their peers and can actually craft a message based around those pain points, their KPIs, right? Because they know their peers intimately. How do they actually craft that message to say, oh, I hear your pain, and actually the solution for what you're struggling with is this product that we already have. They've already bought it. It's in the system. All you need is somebody to understand that pain and make that connection for their peers. It's a salesperson champion. Finally, the last champion is going to be a connector. Someone who understands the social system and the dynamics within an organization and will be generous enough to lend you that knowledge, to lend you the understanding of how we need to go to market here, who we need to get first. After we get that person, it'll be easier. Hey, let's go to operations before we go to finance, because finance really respects operations' opinion, right? Those sort of things, that you can have someone who's like the inside person for you. 5 minutes left. I wanted 10 minutes for questions. This is us, again, Minerva. What we do is an AI platform that will create that knowledge out there. If you think about all your FAQ pages that have little screenshots and red arrows, how many of those are out of date? Does that cause you dread when I say that? Because you know that you're lying to your customers? Let a machine do it for you. Don't hire someone to create that and maintain that. That's ridiculous. Let a machine do it for you. Minerva can do that. We have a white paper I don't know if you can actually scan that, but there is a champion-driven adoption white paper. Feel free to go there. That's my email address, joaquin@minervaknows.com. And thank you so much for having me.
Cool. So we're going to jump into some questions, and we could run over if we have a few others. So, cool.
I'm here.
Awesome. Cool. So what other roles within an organization do you find can own product adoption, whereas the CSM owns the champion relationship, or is it all on the CSM?
It depends on how big your organization is. Minerva is a super early stage startup. We have 16 folks. Everyone's doing everything.
Yeah.
So it's just, everyone's got to do it. Our CSM definitely is driving product adoption. You may have, in organizations, obviously your implementation team, professional services team, that's part of the journey, and they should own part of that. Sales team, obviously you're getting them on board, that's part of the journey, they should own part of that. Your customer education team, that's part of the journey, they can own part of that. But not everybody has these same divisions, so we're seeing lots of different roles, lots of different titles, lots of different sub parts of, it could be under customer success, it could be under product, right? If you have a product-led motion, adoption is owned by product, oftentimes, right? If you've got a really sales-led motion, it's an enterprise sales, very configurable, you're not gonna have a one-size-fit-all solution, it's probably gonna be your CS team. So it really depends on your product, the size of your organization, the philosophy of your organization for who should own that. So that's an unsatisfying answer, but I apologize, that's the answer I have.
Awesome. Cool. All right. And then what do you do if you're siloed with one champion and they end up leaving the org?
You have a retro and try to figure out why you only had one champion. Don't do it.
Fair.
Right? And really, you have to think about, why do we only have one champion? Is it because, like, if you have an AI product where somebody drops a line of code and then everybody forgets about it and other people use it, maybe you only have one champion, I don't know. If it's a dev tool and it's like a DevOps tool, and I don't know. Even those things, you should have more than one champion. You really do want to figure out more than one champion. Because again, if you have these three roles, the maven, the salesperson, and the connector, what's the likelihood that the person who super geeks out on your software is going to be really gregarious and want to go out and understand people's pain and really drive adoption? Unlikely. And so if you have that one champion, who's doing that with you? You need someone to do that with you. And so you probably had a problem from the start. If you lose that champion, if you do only have one champion, you lose that champion, you better scramble. You have other stakeholders that you're talking with, right? We were only talking about champions today, but you've got the economic buyer, you've got the executive sponsor, right? You've got the end users. The champion is only one of your constituencies that you should be engaging with. So if you lose that champion, hopefully you're doing QBRs, and those QBRs are popular amongst these other stakeholders. And when that champion leaves, bring those in and say, hey, this was our core person. Let's make sure you continue to get the value. You're gonna have the business case, you're gonna be showing them the value that they're getting. Let's make sure we continue to do this. Who should step in as the next champion? If you have some product metrics, you might actually know who uses the product already. You might suggest, hey, this person could be our champion. But try and make sure that you have more than one champion to start.
Awesome. And then when you're working with smaller customers like SMBs, how do you find three champions?
You might not be able to, right? And so the advantage, though, is, again, I would say champion-driven adoption. I'm talking about, we can work as customer success. Maybe I can know the names and goals, KPIs, for 5 people in my client organization. If the client organization is only 15 people, that's pretty good. You've got like 33% coverage. But if you're trying to get 200 people on board into your platform, you got no one, essentially, right? And so that's where those champions become really important. With an SMB, you can probably do the work yourself to really connect with much more of those folks. So I'd say, once you get to, certainly, so there's the Dunbar number, 150. 150 is like this magical number of how we can keep social relationships within a system in our head. We understand how people interact with each other. Beyond that, you need more people, for sure. I would say above 150, if you're trying to get that kind of adoption, you definitely need more than one champion. You need a network of champions for real, and perhaps even a network of champions within each function or even within each geography. Below that, you have some hope that you can do it yourself, but it's the in-between 50, 60 folks that you're trying to get on board, and that's kind of the size of the organization. you're gonna have to make sure that the champion you do have is well positioned and well respected, right, to really drive that adoption motion.
Cool. And last question I had, so you mentioned that 16% bucket of laggards, right? I guess for MongoDB, we deal with a lot of banks and financial institutions and healthcare regulators, so we're dealing with like a lot of HIPAA, a lot of SOC 2, et cetera. How do you get over that hump when it's a compliance-related issue?
This could also be, I'm going to fall back on some of the psychology bits. You're going to want to think about how do we create a trusting relationship, right? That's going to be massively important. How do you build trust? Some people you're building trust with interpersonally before you get to work stuff. Some people you got to go to work stuff before you can get to the interpersonal stuff. You have to understand who this person is before you can actually figure out how to engage with them successfully. For those folks, I would imagine they're looking for markers of success to make sure that, hey, you're going to take care of me. You're going to make sure I'm not going to fail here. And so, like SOC 2 is a thing that they're going to say, no, I can't build a relationship with you until I feel comfortable there. But there are going to be other ways, like what are they actually looking for there? Right? What's the underlying need? Right? The position they ask is, give me your SOC 2 report. But what are they actually saying? They're saying, can I trust your software? Can I trust that this organization is going to be around? Can I trust you with my data? Right? And so what are the other things that they're not asking for that you're going to need to do? And so if they're your point of contact, that's going to be massively important. If they're just like the laggard in the organization that's already bought your tool and they're the last person to come on board, the most important thing you can do is just give them the easy first step that's going to get them secure that they're not going to personally fail using your platform. So sounds like you're saying it's a laggard organization, not a laggard person within the organization.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of legacy FIs and whatnot, so yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really, if you haven't read Getting to Yes is a phenomenal book, and it's about, hey, people are going to present you with a position. I need your SOC 2 certification. That's great, but that's not the underlying need. Great, I can get that for you. But really, what are you asking for? Are you asking if I'm trustworthy? Are you asking if I'm going to be here next year? Are you asking, what do we do with your data? What are you asking in that position, right? It's probably not the SOC 2 report in and of itself, unless it's just a checkbox, in which case, cool, checkbox, here you go, we're done.
Right.
But if they're actually asking for something deeper, try and find out that need. What is the deep down need that they have? Are you worried because you've actually worked with a vendor before and they failed you? And you're trying to put us through our paces because you don't want me to fail you because that's going to look bad for you.
Love that. Awesome. Really appreciate it. One more round of applause for Joaquin.